Right, top end rebuild, a lecture, pay attention. The whole reason for this is because last time I did the rebuild, a top end rebuild, which was after the rebore, which was 500 miles ago, I thought this would seal the base gaskets, and it doesn't. It's only for head gaskets. I know. So the whole reason of this teardown is because the base gasket started leaking immediately, but it wasn't getting on the rear wheels, and I hadn't had the bike on the road for a month, so I thought, fuck it, let's just run it in and then drag it in, and there's a few other things I wanted to do to it, so do it all at once indoors. One of which was replacing the clutch spring, which I did outdoors because it's, yeah, that happened a couple of weeks ago in a video. But this is, as far as I've ascertained so far, and bear in mind I've rebuilt this top end possibly 10 or 15 times by now, one way or another, how I've found it to be the best way to make it oil tight through trial and error. Now the base gaskets, I did try making my own. It wasn't too good, so I use proper ones. I buy them in packs of 20 because I do go through them. But that blue muck down there, that's Hylamar. Okay, so it's a gasket jointing compound, but there's a bit more to it than that. The first thing I do when the cylinder's off is apply a layer of Hylamar to the mating surface at the bottom, right? Then I get the gasket, got a used one here, and I smear Hylamar all over the top of that, all over one side of that, the side that's going down. There you go, blue Hylamar, lost the cap. Then here's the important bit. I leave them both to dry. I go off for 5 minutes, do something else, come back. They're tacky now. Put another layer of Hylamar on the mating surface of the crankcases, and another layer on that, and then put it on. Once it's on, put a layer on it, put a layer on the mating surface of the barrels, go off for 5 minutes, come back, another layer, then tighten it all down. This is 47 Newton meters. It's not a lot. You could probably do it by feel, to be honest. But I found torquing these to be a swine because I couldn't get a torque wrench and a socket in there. So then I found out about a thing. Hang on. You know, sometimes you almost will a tool into existence. I didn't even know these things existed. This is a crow's foot. And the idea is it goes onto there like that, and then the drive shaft of your torque wrench goes in there. Now to start with, it was even worse. It was a smaller one. I had a larger torque wrench, so I had to have an adapter, so I was back to square one. Eventually I bought a smaller, slimmer torque wrench. Bear in mind, it's only got to go up to 47 Newton meters, so you can get a very thin, slim one, and that works an absolute dream. I can now do all these, but I couldn't with my standard setup. The dome nuts on the top there are really just for looks. The original nuts to hold the cylinders on are ordinary nuts, but they're double length, and the normal nuts on their own seem to do fine. So, like I say, those dome nuts are just on there for the look of thing. Then we get to the heads. Now, if you use copper gaskets, I've found that heating them up to cherry red, then quenching them quickly in water, that's for used ones. It softens them up again, and you can use them, say, 2 or 3 times. So that's what I'm going to do. I've never found a sealant to be necessary on these. They do tend to hold gas. But I bought this, so I'm going to put it on anyway. Put it on there anyway because, well, can't hurt. That's a scientific reason. It's about 80 Newton meters. They are quite serious, the top end ones, the head ones. It's 4 big bolts. Then you get onto the rocker boxes on the top. And on my front one, I can just put a stock gasket on it, thin as you like, no sealant, tighten it down, and it's fine. It does not leak. This is the back one. The back ones are very, very tight fit on these. In fact, the advice is to loosen the engine, tilt it sideways, and just do it that way. You can get them on. I do get them on. It's a wiggle. And obviously, so does everybody tries this because it's just a real hassle unbolting your engine every time you do something to the rocker box. So you look at there, those faces look very, very clean at the moment. My back one, because it gets bashed about a lot, was leaking, and it leaks over the back of the engine, and eventually, if it gets bad enough, onto the rear tyre. So you don't want that. So what I did was I got some what is it, 80 grit wet and dry paper. I put it on a flat surface, a sheet of glass, and then I just held this thing, went all over it until it scraped enough. That started getting clean, and this was still dirty, so I realised I had something going on here. So I scraped it away until it was all clean, and then I went to, hang on a minute, 320 grit. I'm just trying to read it, it's over the other side of the room. I went to 320 grit just to clean it up, and that's where we are now. There's nothing you can do about the cylinder head. It's made of iron. So, and like I say, the front rocker box, no gasket compound, normal gaskets, it was fine. The back one, I tend to make my own. They're 2mm to try and hold some of the bleeding oil in. I haven't punched the holes in these yet. They're quite difficult to make. And you need to also make the washer there. If you're making your own, you need to make the washer there as well, just so everything's the right height. And ideally use gasket compound because it leaks. But it's such a faff to get it on that by the time you finish, the gasket compound is everywhere except the mating surfaces. So what I tend to do is just wiggle it on there with the thickest gasket imaginable. And that does tend to hold it. A 2mm gasket will hold it. The primary's got a 2mm gasket on it. These things are swines to cut out. I mean, it's the same thickness as the underlay in my kitchen. Doesn't sound like a lot, but when you try being precise with a craft knife, it is thick. Even though they may leak, there's nothing to be gained by over tightening these, aside from warping them. It really is. It's something like it's single figures of Newton meters. My torque wrenches, neither of them go down that far. So just do it up tight. I think that's it anyway. That's what I've learned for this particular bike, top end rebuilds. Double amounts of High Lamar on the bottom gasket, copper gasket, and then you only really have to get tricky with this back one. You do need a thick one on this one, but I'm hoping that the refacing might help as well. Cheery bye.